Well, let's talk about that for a second, Nathan, if you don't mind. Mark, can I kind of dive into that?
Absolutely.
So here's the thing: it was funny, the first two big years that Brian Kelly had at Notre Dame, the 12-0 year in 2012 and 2015, he had first-year starters at quarterback. He had a redshirt freshman both years. Now, Malik Zaire was a redshirt sophomore when he took over in 2015, but he got hurt in the second game, and Deshaun Kaiser took over. And both times they had to kind of dumb things down a little bit, for lack of a better term, and make it a little bit more simplified. And you saw an efficiency level and explosiveness from those groups, especially the 2015 group. That was still by far Notre Dame's best offense under Brian Kelly. I mean, they set a school record for 7 yards of play. That's big time production there. And then you look at the 2010 when they had TJ Jones play. Remember, that was the year they had to move Theo Riddick to receiver because they didn't have any other receivers. I mean, there were no options. Your next best receiver was John Goodman. And, I mean, that was it. And then in 2015 or 2016, the year you're talking about, you had Torrey Hunter Jr. was their only veteran. He was it. And then you had Equanimous St. Brown was a sophomore. C.J. Sanders was a sophomore. I think Miles Boykin was a redshirt freshman. Chase Claypool was a freshman. Kevin Stepherson was a freshman. Javon McKinley was a freshman. Well, Stepherson didn't really play a whole lot. And again, you had a roster filled with young players. Well, then Torrey Hunter Jr. gets knocked out against Texas. Remember that hit he took in the end zone? He missed the next two games. That's when Kevin Stepherson got his shot, and then he made plays, and then, of course, you had to play him the rest of the year. And so that's the thing I point to is there have been those anomalies you could easily point to say, well, that's why that guy played, because they didn't really have anybody else to play. And what I wish Coach Kelly would look at and say, look at the success those young guys had when you actually did play them. They've been pretty good when you actually do give a freshman running back chances. Look what Chris Tyree does, when you actually play a freshman tight end, look what he does. And people want to come back, well, Micah Mayer played. Well, you don't point the exception to define the rule, right? There's got to be times where guys do need to sit. But, when you're playing Georgia in 2017 and you lose by 1 point to the team that eventually becomes the runner-up, and Cameron Smith, Freddie Canteen, and Chris Fink combined for over 100 snaps, and Miles Boykin, Chase Claypool, and Cole Kmet combined for 12. I mean, come on. Get your players on the field. Get your best players on the field. And I think what it comes down to, Nathan, is Coach Kelly on offense says, this is our offense, and we're going to have to fit our players into what we like to do, as opposed to what has made Clark Lee so successful, in my opinion, what made Mike Elko successful, and what will make Marcus Freeman successful if he does what he did at Cincinnati is, here's the players we have. Here's our best players. We make sure we tailor what we're doing to fit those players. If Coach Kelly's finally willing to do that, and I'm hearing some things that are telling me maybe he is, then I think you're going to see the offense become more explosive, and you're going to be like, wow, why is it every year that people are surprised how fast Notre Dame players are at the combine? It's like the last 5. Wow, shocked. I can't believe that Notre Dame player was that fast. I'm like, what? Yeah, well, you don't know if he's fast if you don't get him the ball. So that's the thing, is there's more talent than people realize. You just have to give that talent an opportunity, and that's what I'm hoping that we see from Coach Kelly this spring. And I think we're going to see some changes. I just don't know how much and how deep they're going to be.
I think I need to count. Go ahead, Nathan.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, I think after I think I had Nathan on after I made this comment to Nathan after the playoff game that the one touchdown drive for Notre Dame, while it was still a competitive game, of course they scored late. The touchdown that cut it to whatever 14-7, 21-7, whatever it was at that point, in one aspect was a thing of beauty if you enjoy that kind of football, where they were getting every first down by about that much. And they were just grinding it out and keeping Devontae Smith and Mac Jones and that group off the field. So it was beautiful. And I'm watching this thinking this is exactly what Brian Kelly wants. And this is what they want to do. Mm-hmm. But how many times can they replicate this? They can't replicate it enough during a game. Right. Even if they keep Alabama on the sideline enough to where they can only score 3 or 4 touchdowns, can they do this 3 or 4 times? Probably not, because you got to be perfect for like 13 or 14 consecutive plays. You can't have one misstep. You have to stay in front of the chains. You can't have a penalty. You can't have a sack. You can only have so many incompletions, because unlike Alabama, you watch them play and 2nd and 16, big deal. We're just going to, boom, boom, and we convert the first down.
Yeah. It's a very thin margin for error in that when you're doing it that way.
Yeah, no, I think, Brian, you hit the nail on the head earlier, and I kind of mentioned this a few times, like Mark mentioned when we've talked, on previous occasions. That was the type of offense where Notre Dame can beat 95% of teams because they could out physical them. They could, even out athlete them, even though they don't necessarily use their athletes the way we want. Their defense was going to shut down a lot of those programs. But when you play Clemson, when you play Alabama, when you play Ohio State, when you play Oklahoma, any of those teams, it's going to be harder to win when they're putting up 35 plus on anybody they play, no matter who they're playing. Because in general, I think, even to a certain extent, I know that Alabama probably let up. I'm not too upset with the way Notre Dame's defense played in that in the playoff game overall. But it was just like what Mark said. I mean, if Notre Dame was going to have any chance in that game, they had to play a flawless game, and every drive had to pretty much take off 8-9 minutes. And that's just not. I don't care who you are; it's not sustainable.
Yeah.